This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter, more durable, something that doesn't explode. It settles. I want you to notice what hasn't happened. Not what was said, not what was promised, but what simply stopped. A system designed to surface truth has slowed itself to near silence, not through chaos, through process, through deadlines missed politely, through volume used as fog. Nothing illegal has been declared. Nothing resolved has been announced. And yet, something essential has gone dark. This is how failure looks now. Not loud, administrative, technically compliant, practically empty. If you stay with me, I need you to listen for what isn't being explained yet. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And the next step is understanding who benefits from delay. That's where this moves next. What actually controls the system now isn't ideology. It isn't loyalty. It isn't even power in the traditional sense. It's pacing. Who decides how fast something moves? Who decides how much material appears at once? Who decides when review becomes a holding pattern instead of a step? That's the lever. Modern systems don't need to deny information. They just need to stretch time until attention collapses, until urgency expires, until the public adjusts its expectations downward. Control doesn't look like censorship anymore. It looks like workload staffing charts, process diagrams, carefully worded updates that say everything is happening, just not yet. When speed is centralized, accountability becomes optional because nothing ever fully stops. It just never quite arrives. And when that becomes normal, personalities no longer matter. The machine runs itself. What matters next is how this slowdown became familiar, acceptable, even defensibly. That shift didn't happen overnight. There was a time when delay was a warning sign, when missed deadlines triggered alarms, when silence raised questions instead of excuses. That time is gone. Now, delay is framed as responsibility, caution, thoroughness, virtu. Before, information moved in, bursts, releases, hearings, findings, moments where the public could orient itself. Now, it drips. Incremental, fragmented, just enough to suggest motion, never enough to form a picture. The shift was subtle, so subtle most people adapted without noticing. Expectations lowered, timelines stretched, outrage rescheduled. This is the most dangerous kind of change. The kind that doesn't feel like loss, just adjustment. Because once delay becomes normal, the absence of answers stops feeling urgent. And systems learn something critical. They learn they can survive without resolution. What you're about to see next isn't an exception to this pattern. It's the moment the pattern becomes visible. Then the clock actually ran out, a deadline passed. Not quietly, not ambiguously. A date written into law came and went. What followed wasn't an explanation. It was a fraction, a release so small it required math to understand how small it was. A sliver of material presented as progress. A gesture large enough to point to, too small to answer anything. The system didn't claim refusal. It claimed effort, teams, hours, review, an insistence that the work was massive, complex, ongoing, and yet the numbers didn't match the story. Volume became the excuse. Scale became the shield. This wasn't a failure of capacity. It was a demonstration of control. Proof that compliance could be partial and still count. If this were the whole story, it might end here. A missed deadline, a bureaucratic stumble. But the next move makes it something else entirely. Here's how the system actually works. Damage doesn't happen at the moment of refusal. It happens earlier, at the point where complexity is introduced as protection. When information is bundled into millions of units, review becomes elastic. Redaction becomes discretionary. And responsibility becomes diffused across so many hands that no single delay belongs to anyone. The people doing the work aren't the beneficiaries. They absorb the hours. The scrutiny, the blame, the benefit flows upward to whoever controls the calendar, whoever controls the scope, whoever can say truthfully that nothing is finished yet, because unfinished work can't be judged. It can't be disproven. It can't be confronted. This is why oversight struggles here. The system isn't hiding answers. It's hiding them inside process. And once that mechanism is in place, you don't need secrecy. You just need time. What happens next is what this mechanism enables. When pressure starts to rise, then the pressure spiked, questions multiplied, deadlines stacked, trust thinned. And the response wasn't speed, it was more delay, more review, more staffing, more assurances that everything was underway, not answers, not clarity, just motion without arrival. Oversight didn't collapse, it stalled because every request hit the same wall. Still in review, still being processed, still too complex to rush. This is the acceleration phase, where delay stops being passive and becomes defensive. Each day that passes changes the cost of truth. Attention fades, outrage fragment. Other crises move in. Nothing dramatic has to happen. No confrontation, no denial. The system just keeps moving time forward until the moment demanding answers no longer feels current. And once that happens, the real damage is already done. The next part is where this lands, not abstractly. Personally, here's where this reaches you. Not as a headline, not as a legal debate, but as absence. When systems slow truth this way, the people most affected disappear first. Not from memory. From priority, you're told to be patient, to trust the process, to accept that accountability takes time. But time isn't neutral. Time protects institutions. Time exhausts individuals. If you've ever waited for an answer that never quite arrived, you already know this feeling. The quiet erosion of certainty. The sense that something important is being postponed out of reach. This is what happens when delay becomes policy. Harm isn't denied. It's deferred. And deferred long enough, it stops feeling urgent to everyone except the people living with it. If this matters to you, stay with me. Share this. Hold on to the thread, because what comes next explains why this doesn't stay contained. Why it never does. This doesn't stay inside one system. Because when a powerful institution proves it can absorb missed deadlines without consequence, others take note. Delay becomes exportable, a modèle across borders, across agencies, across governments. The lesson is the same. Control the pace, and you control the outcome. International credibility doesn't collapse with a scandal. It thins quietly. Partners hesitate. Observers wait. Adversaries test, not because of what was revealed, but because of what wasn't. When transparency slows, trust follows. And when trust weakens, cooperation becomes conditional, temporary, transactional. This is how local silence creates global friction. Not overnight, incrementally. No announcement marks the moment it tips. No single decision triggers the shift. You only notice later when the system you thought was stable starts behaving differently. The next part is where the future splits, not into answers, but into possibilities. From here, there are three paths. The first is adjustment. The system absorbs the criticism, tightens procedures, rebrands delay as diligence. Nothing breaks. But nothing truly changes. Truth arrives eventually lighter, cleaner, less disruptive. The system survives intact. The second path is erosion. Deadlines keep slipping. Oversight keeps waiting. Public expectation recalibrates downward again. Not outrage, fatigue, accountability doesn't vanish. It just becomes optional. And then there is rupture. This is the path no one schedules. It happens when accumulated delay collides with a moment that can't wait. A court, a crisis, a leak, a demand that arrives faster than the system can slow it. Rupture isn't dramatic at first. It's procedural failure under pressure. Files unfinished, processes exposed, trust snapping all at once instead of thinning. Which path we're on isn't visible yet, because acceleration hides direction, and that uncertainty is the most dangerous part. If you were waiting for a conclusion, this isn't it. Because systems like this don't end, they drift, they harden, they teach everyone around them what is acceptable. What you've seen isn't a failure of law. It's a lesson in how easily law can be slowed until it no longer interrupts power. Nothing here requires secrecy, only patience, only process, only time, and time, when controlled, becomes a tool. The danger isn't that answers never come. It's that they arrive after they can no longer change anything. That is how accountability is neutralized without ever being denied. So don't look for the moment this resolves. Watch for the moment it stops being discussed. That's when the system has succeeded. If you want to understand where this goes next, how delay evolves into precedent, and how precedent reshapes power permanently, stay here. Follow this thread. This story doesn't end with disclosure. It continues with what silence trains us to accept, and that's what we'll examine next.